we got quite a bit of input and feedback from the listeners on both Twitter, X, and Bluesky. Pretty Minnesota Wild heavy here. We'll kick it off right away. We've got Jake, Edson, and William with a ton of numbers. I'm not even going to try. Both asking essentially for your evaluation on what you've seen from David Jiricek thus far since being called up.
I think overall, it's hard to come in like you did. And he at least he got some time in Iowa to play, because they told me, I talked to him today for a little bit. He said, he hadn't played a lot of hockey, obviously, in the past year. And it's, you need to get back into shape, because it's one thing to be a scratch or this, and you get back skated, but its game shape is different than just being overall in good condition. So, but yeah, I think there's some flashes. Like, obviously, you can't teach the size he has and the reach. There were times in the San Jose game where he really made good pinches and offensive instincts for reads there. I'm still trying to figure out, the skating, can still be a little bit of an issue. They need to obviously improve that, which I'm sure he'll get the Marco Rossi treatment this summer and have him spend a whole time with Andy Ness and work with that kind of stuff.
No family weddings.
Yeah. Hey, it works. But I think getting the skating for him, it'll be so important, because, you try to figure out what kind of player this guy is. And he's obviously a touted prospect, but he's not a big, bruising, Eric Chernak force, right?
Sure.
And he's not a guy probably going to run your top power play. So he's somewhere kind of in the middle, where it's hard to find right shot defensemen with size that can skate. And if he can turn into that, which is why he was drafted so high, be very important to have, as you see guys like Bogosian, who may not be here, forever. You need a right shot defenseman in the system to step in when you have Faber there on the right and Spurgeon, but the left will be Zeev eventually, with Brodin and go from there. So I think it's important to be patient with him right now. I think he's probably playing more than he probably should be with the injuries that are going on, but it's also a good experience to see what he needs to work on. But I know it's a lot they give up for him too. So I think hard for a player to sometimes live up to when you give up 4 picks for a guy.
Absolutely. All right, next one up then. We've got Prestin Douville asking, how concerned are you with the injury history of pillar players like Brodin, Spurgeon, and Eck, most specifically Spurgeon?
Yeah, it's hard because, it's not something that they don't get hurt on purpose, right? And I think he's a really tough guy. It's just hard when they go back-to-back years like this. You have to go through lengthy rehab consecutively. Coming off the back and the hip surgery last summer, he came in tremendous shape. And I think people wondered at age 35, could he still get to that level that he was before? And lo and behold, in the first 2 months of the season, he was that guy. And he was one of the better defensive defensemen in the league. Him and Brodin were great together. So to get this recent kind of injury from the slew foot, really, it's not good. I thought when it happened, it could be season ender, when the way he went down and I saw him walk out in crutches and a big, huge leg brace, you're like, what happened? Could he, he could have easily broken something, but the fact that he's skating now, it's been a couple of weeks, encouraging for the rest of the season. But I see the question's point of, it does seem like each year there's an injury to Brodin, there's an injury to Spurgeon, there's an injury to Eriksson Ek. And I know Ek, for example, plays a really hard game, so he's tend to get in those injuries. And Brodin has the toughest matchups. So, but you definitely, the best ability is availability. People always told me, right? And you need to have, those guys are so important and so irreplaceable, which is what makes those injuries, I think, frustrating for fans. And I'm sure even John Hines would love to be able to roll out Wednesday night and have Brodin on up at, I guess, 97 every day. And now your coach, you don't have those options anymore. So I think as guys get older too, you'll maybe start worrying about that a little bit more. But my bet is that Spurgeon comes back and he comes back and plays to the level he was at the beginning of the season. But that is something that you have to take note of if it happens a lot of times, and the serious injuries more than the little small knick-knack ones.
Yeah, and the one that really stands out more to me is with Act 2, where it's not just losing a player of his impact, but it feels like it's every year, like right at the start of or in the middle of a playoff round. And it's like, great. Like there's nothing you can do at that point to like adapt and make changes for that. Whereas like if you find out you're going to have that issue going into the playoffs and you can make a move at the trade deadline to at least pick up someone that's filling a similar role, not going to be a Joel Eriksson, but at least fill the role, because like that's a massive gap in your lineup. And all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, you're just not going to have this guy who's bred for the playoffs. Good luck.
That's what happened a couple of years ago, right? The Dallas series, and he tried to come back from the broken leg, and he looked great in the skating, and then all of a sudden he did that first shift, and he couldn't do it. So, and that's one of those ill-timed injuries, right? There's no good timing for it, but I think that the Wild have been hit with that a number of times the last few years, of having those injuries at the just absolutely wrong time.
Yeah, for sure. So going off of that then, from Alec, how busy do you expect deadline day to be?
Well, they don't really have much cap space, right? So the only way I see them being active is if there is an injury that goes into a little more LTIR, right? Where you have some space to work with, because there's just, they haven't really been able to accumulate a lot of space over the course of the year either, with all their injuries. Like they're to the point where they needed to have Lauko on LTIR just to get Jiricek up to play and to put 6 defensemen out there. So, things can happen in between now and then. I don't see them having players right now that they're going to be able to just swap out big contracts to get a contract in. I think there are guys that would be great fits, like a Brock Nelson. Overall, don't know if he'd be able to fit at the deadline, but he's that type of player, and he'd be more of a guy that I'd look that the Wild would be able to sign this summer in free agency, since they'll have more money to play with. But as of right now, it could be a very quiet deadline. But a few years back, I think they had cap issues, and all of a sudden it got freed up due to injuries, and they made a bunch of deals. So, but I think for right now, it seems like it could be one of those quiet deadlines based on only the fact that the cap space is the way it is.
I don't know why we thought of this the other night recording Judd's Buds, but do you even give a little consideration to the idea of bringing back the greatest center in Minnesota Wild franchise history, Ryan O'Reilly?
They wanted, they had him for what, 15 minutes? They had him 15 minutes. Yeah. Well, and again, like that's, I know you're joking, but I know Elliot Friedman had a report the other day about how he doesn't have a no move clause, Ryan O'Reilly, but they're going to treat it as though he does. And so if there's a chance for him to move to a quote unquote contender, or have to be an exciting package, so they wouldn't be able to just, it'd have to be a very good package for that. So I don't see as joking aside, I don't see the Wild as a player for Ryan O'Reilly.
No, that's very fair. Let's see here then. We've got a couple of people asking on this one, Alex Pierce and GriddySZN. Do you anticipate Buium, Ohgren, or Yurov joining the Wild by the end of the season without major injury issues continuing? This interview is brought to you by our friends at Waggle Golf. Waggle Golf believes what you wear on the course should reflect your individuality, who you are, where you're from, your hobbies, interests, and passions. All the stuff that makes you, well, you. That's why every design is inspired by the desire to create a piece of apparel that strikes a chord when you see it, that makes you say, wow, that was made for me. Because in a lot of ways, it was. Ready to get your Waggle on? Go to getyourwaggleon.com, throw in promo code SP10 at checkout to take 10% off your entire order.
That's a tough one. And again, it goes to cap space as well, see if they can fit in guys for that. My instinct would be probably won't be a guy like Yurov. Probably, I think there's a chance on Zeev. I think they have to figure out the cap situation first. And Ohgren, I think it'll be dependent on need, right? If there's guys are healthy, if you have Lauco back, you have all these guys, they want him to really be seasoned there and play a top role. And for right now, there's not a top 6 role available to him for him. So unless they're in need of, he continues to dominate in the AHL, there's no reason for him to stay there, and they find a role for him at the NHL level, then I think Zeev might be the most likely of the if he does indeed decide to leave at the end of the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Zeev is the obvious candidate. But with Yurov, I feel like he'll probably get a couple games if they bring him over at the end of the season. I just don't think he's necessarily a guy that's into the playoffs, right? The one that really interests me though is Ohgren. Are you with me, or am I being a little too stingy here and thinking that you don't bring Ohgren up unless it's to play on the second line, right? I don't want him playing bottom 6, even if it's for playoff hockey. I'd rather see him continue to thrive doing what he's doing in Iowa.
And the third line right now, Trenyan and Foligno and Gaudreau has been really good in their role, right? You need a checking line. You need to have those guys. And so unless there's that spot, that Johansson spot on the second line, which he was given that opportunity earlier in the season or during camp to play that role, wasn't able to kind of finish like he was in previous levels. So unless that spot is available, for me, I don't want him play on the fourth line. Not that he can't kill penalties and do all that stuff. Right. But unless there's I know fans are the fourth line hasn't scored anything the last month, that they've had these guys. But, unless there is that specific need, and he's going to be here for the long haul. He's going to be, a guy that's going to be, they hope, much like a Marco Rossi, a fixture in that top 6. So if they don't have to rush him, if they don't have the need, that they probably won't bring him up just to be the 13th forward or 12th forward. Yeah,
very fair. Let's see then. Next one. This one is from Bluesky. We got 2 left, both from Bluesky. From karmaconstable. What does the backup goalie situation look like for 25-26?
I think that obviously depends a lot on how Wallstedt finishes the season. To me, I think we obviously talked to marc-andre Fleury over the weekend. He said there's no chance he's unretiring. So as much as I think he'd be a great option if he wanted to come back, and I'm sure Guerin would sign him for another 1 year, and he'd be a great kind of situation there. That's not going to happen for that. So I think the whole idea, even going to this year, people might have thought before they signed Fleury was it's going to be a Gustafsson and Wallstedt tandem, and I do believe that could be the case next year. But at this point, they got to make sure he's absolutely in the right place physically. I know he had a lower body injury recently he'd been working out with, and mentally. I know this year he talked to some sports psychologists to try to get over some things that he was working on. Obviously stemming from maybe his performance and the role going back and forth. So, but I think he's absolutely capable of playing in the NHL. He just has to kind of be more consistent at the AHL and get his kind of game in order to be have a great summer and put himself in a position to where I wouldn't be surprised if it was a Gustafsson and Wallstedt. I think that would be best case scenario if they them to have 2 goalies that they can count on like that.
Yeah, I think everyone's hoping that that's the situation that makes sense. But there's been muttering out there of, is Fleury really going to retire? But it sounds like you're not giving a whole lot of credence to that. It's possible, but not likely. I mean,
never say never, but I think he asked him point blank in Vegas, and he's like, he kind of laughed and said, no chance. I can't keep on doing this. Oh, one more year. He does look like he can still play. So, but
yeah. No, fair. All right, well, last one here for our good friends at Waggle Golf. Everyone go to getyourwaggleon.com. Make sure you throw in promo code SP10 to take 10% off the entire order. This one comes from Derek Felska via Bluesky. Joe, what is the best NHL video game of all time?
I mean, I started out with Blades of Steel. That was my first love as far as hockey goes. I think from my age, which you'll tell based upon my answer, I think like NHL 93, 94 would be mine. Like Peak, Solane, Peak, those guys. Like,
Yeah.
It was just a phenomenal game for me. I know the graphics and like everything has gone way up over the years with different technology and different systems. But Blades of Steel was a lot of fun for me initially getting into video games and sports video games. And NHL 93, 94 was up there for me. Just like Madden 92, 93. Those were like my main when I was like 10 to teenage years. Like played it all the time. So that'd be mine. How about yours?
So I actually reached out to so it's my college roommate's older brother, who is the authority on not just hockey, but all video games. Yeah. He said the official list is NHL 94 on Sega, NHL 14, and ice hockey on NES. For me personally, I like some of the like older, like, even Gretzky's okay, but there was, I think it might have been the lockout year. It might have been NHL 05, where they had this mode on the game called Free for All. So you and up to 3 other people could all just be an individual player playing in one end of the ice. And it was like first to individually score 5 goals. And like they did the whole European thing where like if you were leading, like your helmet would all of a sudden turn gold.
Yeah.
That one, like weirdly, I just loved. I would just bust out Marty St. Louis every time and just zip around everybody. It was a great time. I liked that. And I really liked, it was probably because it was perfect for my age when it came out too. But NHL Hits was awesome.
Oh yeah.
The 3-on-3 thing, they like made a whole like joke out of it, like crazy players, crazy rinks you play in, you throw guys over the boards. And it was pretty much the race to, okay, you're taking one of Colorado, Detroit, and New Jersey. Which one are you going to be? Because those teams were loaded. But 94, to your point, that's one that everyone like holds in pretty high acclaim. And actually, so my roommate from college, for his bachelor party, his older brother set up a tournament of 94. We all literally like drew cards to like see what order we picked in, and he got like 4 plastic cups with like team logos on it. So like whatever cups you got, that was your team. I had to pay someone to get the Penguins cups. I'm not embarrassed to say that. But so I'm not going to like pretend that there were no adult beverages involved, but it was not the crux of the reason here. My buddy Pat and I play each other. It is vintage Winnipeg Jets versus Pittsburgh Penguins. We made it 1.5 periods in that game before realizing we were both using the wrong controller. Like we thought we were controlling the other people because it was like that, like weird and laggy. Like I just like not used to how that worked. And the game was 1-0 at that point. Mind you, like it was a 1-0 game, and somehow we both thought that we were like using our teams and we weren't. And then finally it like kind of caught on, and I like went the other way with my guy. I'm like, holy crap, just switch controllers right away. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, we both have been the wrong team this whole time. Oh, so God. It's always a little jarring going back and playing those old games. Like the one for me, GoldenEye, was my favorite game like ever on Nintendo 64. If you go back and play it now, I'm like baby deer, like just can't even walk. It's horrible. But back in its day, 94 I think is the winner across the board if you were to poll everybody and give them truth serum if they actually played it in its time. But thank you everyone again for the questions. We'll have another mailbag coming out in probably a month or so per usual, but as always, feel free to ping in with questions if you guys have them throughout the week and things you want to make sure we cover. We'll do our best to make sure we're bringing you all the wild info that you guys care about the most.